strong, healthy, Reformed churches there, like the one that we go to. It has about 450 people on Sunday morning, solid expositional preaching, good pastoral leadership. And it's growing too, which is just an act of God. They had to stop baptisms for a little while during the COVID time, and then they started it again, and I think for about 9 months they baptized 1 or 2 people every single Sunday. Just a number of people coming to Christ, a number of people wanting to join the church. God's just working, and we're thankful for that. And what we need in order to respond to that work of God is we need well-trained pastors so that there can be church plants and churches pastored by people who know the theology and the Bible really well. Now, there are faithful pastors there, but those faithful pastors are asking, pleading even, for solid theological education, because they know that even though they're qualified to be pastors, they know that the solidity of the church, the faithfulness of the church for generations is going to be greatly helped if they know not just the bare minimum about theology in the Bible, but if they go deep in the languages. Martin Luther famously said that when the languages are lost, that's the Greek and Hebrew languages are lost, people don't know those languages, that within a couple generations the gospel will be lost. And so they're wanting to know Greek and Hebrew well, they're wanting to know historical theology and systematic theology really well so that they can help do their part in setting the church on a solid course for generations to come. And there's really no way to get that training, at least in Nairobi, and it's extremely hard to get that training anywhere else in Africa. There are some schools in South Africa, but we tried to send a guy to South Africa and it didn't work because of governmental regulations. So even though there are some schools in Africa, those aren't necessarily accessible to most of the people outside of South Africa. People would love to come to the U.S. and study at a school like Westminster or Reformed Theological Seminary or other really good schools in the U.S. However, that's just not practical because of the costs and the fact that it would uproot their lives and their family for so long. So we're trying to put a seminary that would be the caliber of the best seminaries in the U.S. We're trying to put that there in Nairobi so that students can get the best theological education there. And we're doing that for the sake of the church in Africa. We're also doing that for the sake of missions because, while on the one hand, there is, God is moving, God is working in Africa. There are places where, yes, people are coming to faith. There's also places in Africa where the gospel hasn't even been reached. Like, they don't even know that there is a thing called the Bible. And they're unreached people groups. And people from our church want to go to those unreached people groups. And so we want to equip them to be able to do that. We want to raise up missionaries from Africa, for Africa, and other parts of the world as well. And so having solid theological education there will also serve missions because it will send people from those places to other parts of the world. So that's what we're doing. And thank you for supporting us. And in that work, we appreciate it. Couple questions about anything I said or the video? Any questions?
What classes are you teaching now?
So I actually this semester, which just kind of ended, I taught one class that wasn't actually for our school, but for another school. It was a PhD seminar on the doctrine of God. So that was fun and challenging. I will go back and I will co-teach a class on medieval church history. And then next year I will co-teach medieval or ancient church history, medieval and Reformation. And I'm going to teach Acts and Paul, theological anthropology, and ecclesiology and eschatology, and the book of Hebrews, Lord willing. See, every other year I'll have a really intense teaching schedule. And then the next year will be, one year will be an intense teaching schedule, next year will be a lot lighter. And so it'll kind of flip-flop back and forth, which will be good. It'll give me some time to do some other things when I'm not teaching like crazy. And then when I'm teaching like crazy, I'll just be all into that mode. Yeah?
We had Tim Avery and his family here.
Yes. You saw them on the video.
Yep, that's right.
Oh, it's great. It's great. Tim and Carol and their kids. So they lived with us for a week or two when they were getting settled, and then they moved into an Airbnb that was right next to us for the next like 3 months. A lot longer than they were expecting to. They were having stuff done to their house, so we got to know them really well. And yeah, great family. We love being with them. And I think any seminary would love to have him because he can actually teach Greek and Hebrew as a living language. So you saw him on there. He's speaking Greek to his students. If you sit outside his classroom as he's teaching Greek, he is talking to them in Greek, and they are responding in Greek, which is just a wonderful thing. And so I don't know where else you're going to get that in the world. And that's a phenomenal thing, I think, for our students because they know a bunch of different languages, all of which they've learned through hearing and then speaking, none of which they've learned from a book. Learning a language from a book is like, to them it's like if somebody just gives you a book about how to ride a bike and then expects you to get on a bike and be able to do it. It's like that doesn't work. And so yeah, they're eating that up. They're doing it, and they're learning Greek and Hebrew really, really well, or at least Greek. Greek this year, and he's going to teach Hebrew next year, Lord willing. So we're thankful for them and hope that they can be there for a long time. He also is doing great things to help the publishing aspect of what the ministry is doing too. Something I'm not involved in and didn't even mention on the video, but we're trying to publish books from African writers, and he's helping with the editing process and moving those things along. So, yeah.
I cheated, and I just asked what might be an interesting question to ask.
Oh, that's kind.
And it suggested to me that transportation would be an interesting question to ask. Can you tell me about transportation, where you are?
Somebody suggested that. Yeah. So actually, I want to ask my daughter that question. Because I have not done all the kinds of transportation that she has. So Anna, what is transportation like? And what is a matatu? And why should everybody ride on one?
Transportation is doesn't kill you. You'll have a blast.
Important qualification?
Yeah. Public transportation is we have buses and motorcycles, and the buses. Imagine like if a gang owned a bus, that's what they look like, and if the gang also drove the bus, that's what they would act like, and they're a bit scary. Yeah, and the motorcycles, people use those a lot too. They're a lot more dangerous, but you can fit up to 4 people. I don't want to do that to everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else my kids want to add about the transportation? Sammy, what do we often see in the roads? Yes, there's lots of cows on the roads, which, I don't know what you're imagining, a lot of what we're driving through is well-developed, city-like conditions. And so we're not in a village. And so, and yet there are still herds of cows walking down the road because a lot of the land was formerly Maasai land, that, a tribe that had a lot of, that raised cattle. And so they have right-of-way on these roads. And it's even written in the driving handbook that if they signal you to stop for cows or something, you have to stop by law because it's preserving their cattle herding. Yes?
Is there a favorite Kenyan dish that your family has taken a delight in?
Once again, Anna, what is your favorite Kenyan dish? What color is it? And what's it called? And what is it made of?
Mashed potatoes mixed with like peas and like beans and other stuff. It's really good.
Because of the strong the British influence as a former British colony, a lot of the food, especially in Nairobi, is influenced by the British. So there's lots of curries and English breakfast and other things. So it's harder to get kind of authentic Kenyan food. On the coast, you get that a little bit more, but it's a little bit harder to get that in Nairobi.
What's
Yeah.
the population of Nairobi, and are you near the city?
We are, we're kind of in the outskirts, think of the suburbs of Nairobi, in a sense. We didn't want to be like downtown because of there's a lot of smog, a lot of pollution. And we moved there in part for health reasons. So, so we are just on the outskirts of the city, technically within the Nairobi city limits. And the population is about 5 million. So a very large city. It's also a hub there. So the major corporations have their headquarters there. The UN is there, the huge US embassy. The flights are much cheaper to Nairobi than other places. So it really, really makes sense as a place to put a strong seminary because it's where people come for, the best education in East Africa is there in Nairobi. And so putting a seminary there in the city makes a lot of sense because of the 5 million people around and also the ease of travel to that city from many countries in East Africa. Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
Was it a big adjustment when you all first moved there, the family and the food, and then tried to?
Yeah, there was an adjustment. So we moved to Zambia first, and then we moved to Kenya. Kenya is a lot more developed than Zambia. So some of the bigger adjustments in terms of like, we don't have running water or electricity for a good bit of the day was when we were going to Zambia. However, in Kenya, we've actually gotten to know the people better. So in terms of understanding more about the culture and knowing people.
Oh, you don't been there now.
So we've been in Africa for 3.5 years, in Nairobi for 2 years. And I've been away from here for 5.5 years now. So yeah, and miss you guys. And the, also thankful for you and thankful for my time here. And as I'm teaching students, hardly a class goes by that I don't share some story or something I've learned throughout my pastoral ministry here and encouraging things from all that God has done through you. So many of the things that God has done here and that we were part of are now things that people in Nairobi are talking about because I've shared that and all that God did. So no way that I could really bring to the students what they need in terms of pastoral preparation without my time here. So deeply thankful for that. And people in Nairobi are deeply thankful for that too. So yeah. Yes.
Yes, since Kenya is a British colony,
Yeah.
they're versed in English language. Do they prefer you to speak more of English or want you to speak Swahili?
Well, yeah, I mean,
indigenous language?
they don't prefer me to speak any Swahili because I don't know it, and if I did, it wouldn't be very good. But they do prefer. I need to be learning, and yeah. But everybody speaks. My students all speak English, and that's the preferred language. They've all been to university in English, so that's the academic language, and that's the language that they read, and so that's what they want their classes in. Yeah. Yeah.
I know when you guys first moved from Zambia to Kenya, there was kind of coming out of Central Africa Baptist University, there was I think a desire to perhaps kind of plant a satellite campus
Yeah.
up there. Is that still happening? What's the status of it?
Yeah, thanks. So Central Africa Baptist University, I'll say this first, their master's program is moving along, and I flew back there in December to teach a class for them. I'll probably go back next January to teach that class again. So we're keeping a relationship with them. It actually doesn't work to plant any school in Nairobi as a satellite campus without being attached to a major university. We found that out. There's actually there's a law that explicitly forbids that, and a 2-year jail sentence associated with breaking that law. And so, yeah, I don't want to do prison ministry, like not feeling called to that.
Doesn't count as like a major
No, you need a major university in Nairobi.
Oh, I see.
And our church doesn't count as a major university.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. So we would love to, actually, what our students would love is if we put an RTS campus there in Nairobi. And RTS would be even willing to talk with us about that, but that would just violate a law. There may be a way around that that's legal that we're kind of exploring, but so far we haven't had any open doors for that. So what we're actually doing then, this is getting a little bit further away from your question, but what we're actually doing is we're working with Puritan Reformed Theological Seminary with their online MA degree. They allow us to teach half of that degree, but it's our classes, our unaccredited classes that we're teaching. Half of the credits for that 52 credit MA degree are taught in person and they get transferred in. So they only have to take about 10 classes then online, and they get an MA from Puritan. The rest of the classes they take with us. And then we're also teaching a broader MDiv degree, which is not actually a degree, an MDiv certificate level training. That's 104 credits. And then all of those extra ones are taught through us. So out of 104 credits, they take 27 online. And then they get an accredited degree, but also an unaccredited MDiv level training. And we're talking to schools in the US, the UK, and Belgium about admitting our students into PhD programs on the basis of our unaccredited degree. They look at us, we promise that we'll meet certain standards, in terms of professors and everything like that, and assuming we can meet those standards across the board, then those schools will accept our program as though it were accredited, and students can get into PhD programs through that. So, yeah, that's what we're doing. Steve?
So, a mile wide and inch deep, but there are these pockets that we've been discussing of kind of healthy Reformed churches.
Yeah.
And apparently the students desire seminaries like Westminster, RTS, Puritan Reformed. These traditionally are all kind of Presbyterian leaning,
Yeah.
Presbyterian producing seminaries. Is the Reformed landscape more Baptistic or more Presbyterian, or they don't really care about that, they just like the kind of historically broad Reformed?
Yeah, the third option. They don't really care about that. There's not really any solid Presbyterianism there in Nairobi. There is a presbytery, but it's actually not Reformed at all. It's kind of Arminian, which is kind of a contradiction. There's one solid guy that we know that's in the, it's actually called the PCA, Presbyterian Church of Africa. There's a solid guy there, and he is like teaching people what Reformed theology is, what historic Presbyterianism is, but he's the anomaly there. So, in order to be Presbyterian, you need a presbytery, right? You need a network of churches that are existing together in a certain order and structure. Everything done in order, that's the Presbyterian model. And that just doesn't exist in any kind of solid way. You do have some churches there. One church we're working with is not consistently Baptistic, and they'll baptize infants or baptize adults. So kind of an evangelical free sort of way of thinking. But they're solid on the gospel, and we're working with them. And we've intentionally put our seminary together in such a way that it's not explicitly Baptistic. And so we'd welcome, talking to a professor at Westminster about him coming over next summer to teach, and we're happy to do that without any problem. So yeah, we're not explicitly Baptistic in that way, though being explicitly connected with the Baptist Church and having a lot of students go through their internship program, there's a strong Baptistic influence there. And so far, everybody's been persuaded of that, because I think it's persuasive. So we don't have to worry too much about that. The logic of it seems to work. We have students in the PRTS program, and there is an option for them to take a class on covenant theology, which in many ways covers the theology that our school would generally agree with, and yet also teaches infant baptism. And the students enjoy taking that class, and then they enjoy learning about infant baptism at, not from a straw man argument. From a person who actually believes it, they enjoy that. And we encourage that so that they can actually understand what that argument is. But so far, none of them have been persuaded. Yeah. Yes.
Yes, I'm from Nigeria,
Okay.
and when missionaries come, the administrator of the city usually like to send them to the rural areas.
Yeah.
Because they are still practicing they call it traditional, but it's actually idolatry and
Yeah.
all the rest of that. As a professor, have you had the opportunity to go into this rural city or town to espouse the
Yeah.
gospel, or you're just in the urban teaching
Yeah.
the students?
Yeah, are we going, so there's a bit of yeah, there's some tension there. We're in the city where there are the most solid, good churches.
Yeah.
Right. And we have gone not all the way to like a village area. We've gone to another city that is a lot less, it's a lot less Western oriented, which doesn't necessarily mean any less Christian. So we have had some exposure to broader, so in Nairobi, it's going to feel a lot more like the US than it is in other places. We've gone to those other places to get a sense of, okay, this is what it feels like. But here's our thinking here, and this is what has been encouraged by our pastor, is that the local people, the people from Nairobi, are going to do a whole lot better job going to the villages than I'm ever going to, right? Because they're going to know the languages, and they're going to be able to communicate with the people a whole lot better. So I am trying to equip them so that they can have all the theological resources so that they can go and do that. Because, not because I don't really want to go to those, but just the other people are going to do so much better a job than I will. And I believe in them. I'm really confident in them. They are super gifted. And yeah, so they need certain things from me, and then they're good to go. And we're very excited about what God's doing in them. And so yeah, that's why. And I don't even, in many contexts, I wouldn't even say that I'm a missionary. So I'm not going to a place where there's no churches. I'm going as a professor, sent by my local church, so if you want to call me missionary in that sense, very much at the request of the local churches there in Nairobi in order to help them do things that they need. But in no way am I going to a place where there's not good churches. There are great churches there. Yeah. Keith?
Yeah, when we got to know you here, I always thought of you as a pastor theologian, right? So a pastor's heart, but loves theology, loves delving deep into scriptures and the truths of scriptures. But since you've left, you've added school administrator, professor, a number of things to your hat. But I can't imagine you've left behind the pastor's heart and the deep theologian. So, what are some of the things that you kind of recently been thinking through, the kind of Spirit is using to sanctify you in your own kind of personal life? And have you been able to kind of continue on pastoral ministry somehow?
Yeah, good question. And I should only have a few minutes. I feel like doing what I'm doing now is in some ways the most comfortable, like within my gifts, the way God made me, than anything else that I've done in some ways. And yet I do miss some of the pastoral ministry, that just to see God work in people's lives up close. It was an amazing thing, and something that I think I will always just treasure, that I had the opportunity to do that. And as I said before, in a lot of ways, I'm teaching sort of out of that experience. So that experience feels real to me, even if that's not my immediate life. I do get a chance to preach a couple times a year there in Nairobi, and there's great people there, so they don't need me. It's just, let's throw the theologian up there and see what happens a couple times a year. And I really, given the pressures of everything else, don't have time to do it really more often than that. I'm wanting to teach in a way that, especially as we get a little bit more clarity of what we're doing, I'll have more time with students. So there's a somewhat pastoral aspect. And also, I'm fellow church members with many of the students too. So there's a sense of sharing our life together in that way. But also, doing theology in such a way that even when it switches from the pastoral pulpit side to the more lectern side, but it's theology for the church. I mean, there's always a pastoral approach to that. And I've been, as you pointed out here, when I was here, sanctification, union with Christ were things that's what I did my dissertation on. That was near and dear to my heart. And I've continued thinking through that a bit more. I'm intrigued also in ways of relating sanctification, union with Christ, and our bodily experience. I'm starting to think through that a little bit more. I'm doing 5 talks on union with Christ at a conference in August in Nairobi, and then 3 talks on union with Christ at a conference in Mauritius, an island off the coast of Africa. Yeah, suffering for the sake of the gospel. Somebody's got to do it. It's a beautiful place. It'll be a great treat to go. I'll be doing that then. And one of the talks is union with Christ and the body. I'm going to try to think through some things. Another one of those talks is union with Christ and created male and female. So I think that there's ways in which that relates also to our sanctification. So, and I think that there's a lot of things there to continue to explore at an academic level, but also because it directly relates to pastoral issues. And it's fun too when I'm spending a lot of my time teaching people who are doing pastoral ministry. So I'm talking about some of these things and like, oh yeah, I can see that's useful for 5 conversations I had last week. And so to be able to explore some of these theological ideas with people who are directly talking to people in pastoral ministry is also a wonderful thing. I'm not primarily interacting with other academics. I'm primarily interacting with pastors. And so that's a great way to do academic church work, because it is. And there's a long history in the history of the church of academic church work. That's a real thing and an important thing. And so it's great to be able to do that, somewhat with other academics, but also with people who are pastors who are eager to learn. So let me do one more question, and then I want to ask my kids some questions. Yes.
The students that you are teaching, are they from the various churches, or they are purely academic students who wants to go into ministry? And if that is so, are they only Kenyans or other nearby countries that are coming in to come and
Yeah.
be under
So I'll do the last question. There's a Congolese brother who is kind of taking classes with us. We're also trying to get him into a PhD program. He actually lives with us on our compound. We share life together. And so, he came from Congo there. We can't, at this point, with our school, do academic visas. So we're not like saying to all of Africa, come and we'll give you a visa to study with us. The people in East Africa have a fair amount of ability to come, but they can't be there just to study at this point. Hopefully we can change that some way, somehow. Not sure. One of the things to work on in the future. The first 2 questions that you asked, the answer is really yes to both of them. They are people from local churches. And we're not going to just take anybody to study with us. They need to be really proven at a local church. And if that local church recommends them, then we'll invite them to study with us. We're not just, you can't just find us on the internet and enroll in that way. It has to come through one of the churches that we know. But they are wanting to study for ministry. So we have men and women who are there, and then one woman who is studying with us wants to go as a missionary, and we believe men are to be elders, but yet we're happy to have men and women studying with us for work in
If they
areas.
complete the session, do they have a first degree in divinity, or what certificate do you give them
Yeah.
to
So
enable them to go out there and do?
What they have is, and again, without being a major university, we can't actually give master's degrees. But they will end up with a master's degree from a US school, an MA degree from a US school, and then our certificate that doesn't actually mean anything to the Kenyan government, but to schools like Puritan and Southern and perhaps Westminster and good schools in the UK, it means that they can enter their PhD program if they have everything else in order. So, and that means something to the students, yeah. Cool, let me ask just a couple questions to our kids. Matthew, can you say a few things about our church? You had said that, talked about that before. In terms of just, what do you see the church doing intentionally for discipleship? Like, how do you see the church doing that?
Every other week, and sometimes 3 weeks in a row. Every other week, we have, they provide food after the service, and so everybody meets in the wall and talks to each other. There's a lot of fellowship and social life that Christians do with each other. And walking around, the conversations, when someone is superficial and hanging out, there will also be a lot of like deep discussion of theology, like people sharing personal stories that you'll overhear. And so I think it's really cool just to see after the service being off that. And then also the preaching that others are really intentional about giving pretty direct application for other people how to have relationships with other people. And then also like coming in not really knowing anybody there, and people just immediately started introducing themselves and talking to us. It was very welcoming to us. So even if we were so received like that, really cool.
And how long are we at church on a Sunday?
If we show up for worship practice, then we'll show up at about 7, and then if they have to meal afterwards, there's a time we 3 or 4.
7 in the morning.
Or-
Is that what you said?
Yeah, 7 in the morning. Practice at 3.
We leave the house at 7:30, yeah. Yeah, so.
All right, we're doing that here.
I got another 3 hours, right? Speaking of food, Anna, what are the pizza parties? Can you talk a little bit about the pizza parties? And how is that helpful for the church life and fellowship?
Yeah, so a while ago,
If you have pictures, feel free to do those.
we invited some people over to our house.
Just pizza party.
Pizza, we made, 2 brick ovens in our backyard. And then, we invited some people over from church to make pizza with us. And they invited some people, and those people
Just
invited people.
go through,
And
yeah.
we kind of had 30 people at our
Yeah,
house.
just, you can flip through.
And then it was a whole lot of fun. So, we decided to do that more often. And so once every couple months, we'll just have about 30 people over. And we'll make pizzas and hang out. And sometimes people just stay the night because they want to stay late and they don't have to go home. And they'll stay until Sunday and they'll drink with us. And, at first, for us, it was a really good way to meet people because they're all at our house and we don't know any of them, so you can just have to talk with them. And then after a while, it started getting more busy, and it was like, because we are having more people over, so we found that we're not getting to know people as well. But I found that when I go to other hangouts at, just like at the houses from people at our church, even if the host isn't necessarily, I don't talk to the host, I can talk to a lot of other people from our church. And that's the best way that I've found to meet people. So, having people over to our house is a good way for them to meet each other. That's it.
Sarah, can you, so one thing we haven't talked about, our kids are homeschooled, but also go to a co-op. And there's no one who's quite in our situation in the co-op as well. Sarah, can you say a couple things about the co-op? Maybe also the, was it Exploring Africa class that you did? And so you're taking an Exploring Africa class with a bunch of people from Africa, and you're not. What's that experience like?
Yeah, so the co-op is all trans, which means Indian and Filipino. And so we go to the exploring Africa class, which is where all the kids my age are learning about geography in Africa. And one particular class we talked about the wrong conception people have, which was really eye-opening as I had those, not when I was in the class, but before we moved to Africa, I realized those things that we just assumed that were true. And some of those things that people don't really realize how many people are there, how big it is, and how developed it's like. So just talking about that, can be very,
Oh. Lydia, what's your favorite class in co-op? Cool. Cool. Well, we should end, right? 10:15. Any of us are happy to answer any other questions as we go. A couple of things, just pray for us. For the rest, we have 3 more weeks here. And so just appreciate your prayers that God would sustain us. A lot of us are feeling like, okay, we've been in the U.S. for about 3 weeks, 4 weeks. We'd like to get home. This has been great, but just that God would sustain us for the next 3 weeks. Maybe there's a bit of weariness. And that just we'd be loving other people around us for the next few weeks. Also, just appreciate your prayers. It was mentioned in terms of the budget that we need to raise. We thank you for supporting us. We are well supported. But now I find myself in a situation of also needing to raise money for the school itself. And our budget for the school is $56,000 for 2024. We've got enough for 2023. Some of our things, our needs will increase in 2024. We're trying to take on a full-time administrator. So just pray that we can meet people who are interested in supporting the school and that God will bring that money together. Part of what is going to allow me to teach all those classes that I plan to teach next year is a full-time administrator running the sort of day-to-day operations of professors flying in and just keeping track of what all the students are doing and everything, so I don't have to do that. So yeah, appreciate your prayers for that. Yeah.
I was just wondering who students do that?
We have about 30 students, yeah. In 2022, we had 5 students who were connected with the church, and then we're like, okay, let's open this up to other churches. We sent out like 6 emails to various other pastors, and then within like a week, we had 30 students. And some of the word of mouth is like crazy there. One of our people who teaches very part-time for us also teaches at another school, and that teacher had students at his other school coming up and asking him about the program because his name was attached to it. And they found out about the program through people in Uganda. So it's like, like the way, and like a day after the email went out. So it's like, this is crazy. Word of mouth has gotten, all over the place. Crazy, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Steve's going to close in prayer, but email went out, I think, a couple days ago. If you want to hang out and spend more time with the Chris family, you're welcome to come to my house for lunch after church this morning. Hang out here for a few minutes so Sarah and I can get home. But then you're welcome to come over and enjoy fellowship and some food with the Christs if you want to.
In other words, race to Keith's house and wait on his porch.
You want to help? Thank you.
Once you guys are out the door, we'll count to 5. Let me pray. Lord, thank you for this time that you have given us. Lord, we do thank you for the evident grace that you have poured out upon the Chris family and your good pleasure in using them in Nairobi. And Lord, we pray that that would continue and that your church would grow boldly and brightly and be a means of grace to not only that part of the world, but that it would reverberate back here to our corner of the globe, so that your kingdom would be more and more connected as we, all of
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Mike,
Hello. Oh, you didn't have to do that. Thank you. How are you?
I'm okay.
Good, good. So